Hi, hello, and salam, everyone. My name is Raahim Waqas, and thank you for the introduction, Khaya. When I first came to America for my undergrad degree, I was expecting to be welcomed with downward gazes and words of judgment behind my back. Because, I'm brown and Muslim and attended college in a not so racially diverse area. But before I start about me, let me ask all of you, how many of you have ever felt judged because of your appearance, because of the way you talk, or just on the basis of who you are? Raise your hands and think about it for a moment. And keep that moment in mind and that feeling in heart as I tell you my story. A couple of days before boarding my flight to New York, I was told by my friends, Raahim, make sure to delete anything incriminating on your phone. I laughed at the time, taking it very seriously, because how would my collection of cat videos raise TSA's eyebrows? It just did not make sense. Simultaneously, however, I was also prepped for the extra screenings at the airport and questions that I will have to ask that other people might not ever be asked. And again, I took it very unseriously, blaming it on my family's paranoia. But it wasn't their paranoia, it was the reality of people who look and talk like me have lived through. A reality shaped by years and years of prejudice and racial profiling, a fear ingrained in my parents' generation because of the way they look, and they were born in a country that lived in the shadow of the war on terror. The war on terrorism led by the United States of America after the events of 9/11 did not just influence global politics, but heavily impacted the perception of South Asian, Middle Eastern, and Muslim people all over the world. The media portrayal reduced people who look like me into stereotypes. One day we're scammers, and the next we're terrorists. It's like all of a sudden we're stuck in just two scenes, one of suspicion and the other of fear. I experienced this firsthand when I was stopped for one of those extra screenings at the airport. And to my surprise, the questions weren't about what I was packing or where I was going. They're about who I was and what my religious beliefs are. That moment was incredibly frustrating and even humiliating for that matter. On the contrary, however, when I reached my college campus, I was welcomed with laughs and smiles all around me. I was welcomed by people my age, my peers, people who understood the importance of inclusivity, kindness, and a world without prejudice. My generation, the Gen Z. The Gen Z are people who were born between years of 1997 to 2013. So I am Gen Z, and most of you are also Gen Z. We are the so rebellious generation that continues to defy cultural and societal norms because we just do not have the capacity to tolerate discrimination and biases. The world that you and I were born into was dealt with really bad cards. But what does that really mean? Because if you look at it, every generation has faced adversity. Every generation has had their fair share of problems as well, and they have persevered. And I'm not trying to compare, but what I want to highlight is why is it that the modern day challenges feel so uniquely overwhelming? And the answer to that is very simple. It's because we're not just dealing with one or two bad cards, we're dealing with the whole deck stacked against us. A climate crisis that has reached critical levels, and the very existence of our planet hangs on a balance. A global economy that, while it is recovering, it is increasingly unequal, pushing people like you and me into debt before we can even start walking. Political instability that's taken all over the world and spans the globe from rising authoritarianism to crumbling democracies. But what makes the current generation different is that, unlike past generations, we were the first to grow up fully aware from the stakes from a very young age. Thanks to the internet and social media, we have been flooded with global crises in real time. There's never been a buffer for us. There's never been a period of blissful ignorance. And that's an incredible way to carry, but that is also our strength. With these bad cards that we've been dealt with, you would expect us to be more cynical. However, it has done quite the opposite. It has made us fiercely determined to demand for change, determined to hold institutions responsible, determined to rewrite the rules of the game. Because we aren't just experiencing these crises, we are actively inheriting them. And as inheritors of a world plagued by these issues, we feel the urgency to act, and to act quickly for that matter. Because if we won't, then who will? Throughout history, young people have been at the forefront of pushing forward social change. We, the Gen Z, are just the latest chapter in the decades-long encyclopedia of youth-led activism. From the demonstration against the Vietnam War to the civil rights movement in the United States, to figures like Bhagat Singh, who implored the youth to rise against the British colonialism era in the Indian subcontinent. Young people have consistently challenged the status quo and fought for justice. And to be very frank, activism isn't something that we stumbled upon. It is something that has been woven into the very fabric of youth culture. Let's look at an example. Let's look at workplaces and advocacy in workplaces. The Gen Z is calling out exploitative practices and working conditions and refusing to accept hierarchies that allow employers to overwork and underappreciate their employees. We're also labeled to be lazy and difficult to work with. But it's not that we are difficult to work with, it's that some employers are difficult to work for. What we are doing is that we're simply rejecting and refusing to perpetuate outdated systems that prioritize profit over people. And yes, we're also often accused of being glued to our screens and social media. And where that is very much true, it is also our greatest asset. Social media has given us a platform to amplify our voices and protest in ways that is unimaginable to previous generations. I'm sure that many of you over here have posted or shared about a cause that you believed in on Instagram, Twitter, or any other online platform. Remember that, and remember and think about what motivated you to post it. Exactly, that motivation and the drive for change is why our generation's digital fluency is such a game changer. Let's look at another example. The first time I experienced the power of our generation was during the #JusticeForZainab movement in Pakistan. Zainab Ansari, a 6-year-old girl, was brutally assaulted and murdered in 2018. Zainab's tragic murder sparked outrage across the country, igniting protests that I will never forget. I remember seeing students my age, and even younger for that matter, taking to the streets demanding for justice, even in the small towns and areas where activism and advocacy was far from the norm. For the first time, my country witnessed the sheer collective power of my generation. The power that pressured authorities to prioritize the case, resulting in the very swift arrest of Zainab's murderer. This marked a rare instance of expedited justice within the Pakistani judicial system. And even beyond the legal outcome of things, this movement brought critical attention to the systematic issues surrounding child abuse and women's safety in Pakistan. It sparked national-level conversations about the need for stronger laws, better enforcement, and greater public awareness. Zainab's case also led to the establishment of helplines, campaigns, and stricter protocols for handling such cases in the future. More recently, I've seen this power grow globally. With the student protests for Gaza have been a striking example of how the Gen Z is uniting across borders. From college campuses to the streets, students around the world have worked together, showing solidarity and demanding for change. Through social media, we have challenged narratives and provided voices to the voiceless. What started as localized movements turned into a global outcry, an unstoppable force fueled by the power of the people, the power of digital mobilization. And to be honest, whether you agree or disagree with either side, what is undeniable is that the Gen Z has continuously shown resilience, unity, and the ability to mobilize quickly for a cause that we believe in. Our approach to advocacy and activism is very distinct. We bring creativity to our movements, from viral hashtags to engaging visual campaigns. We use humor, art, and storytelling to connect with people on a human level. We're also deeply intersectional. We understand the fact that world issues are not just linear, but complex and interconnected. We recognize that different aspects of one's identity, like gender, race, and economic background, it don't exist separately, but actually shape our experiences together. This holistic approach makes sure that no one is left behind, and the oversimplification of complex issues isn't something that happens. We're also able to recognize that if we do not take matters in our own hands, change might never come. Unlike past generations, we have unparalleled access to technology and social media, allowing us to organize, educate, and mobilize at instant speeds. And let's be honest here for a second. The Gen Z is not only advocating against present-day issues and conflicts, it is also tackling the setbacks and stereotypical values passed down from the past. Values that have perpetuated inequality, exclusion, and discrimination for centuries. By questioning these outdated ideas around gender, race, class, mental health, workplace hierarchies, climate change, and beyond, we are redefining societal rules to push forward the world into a peaceful place. Though the circumstances of those problems may have changed, the very principles of what we are fighting for today are same as those in the past. As members of the Gen Z and beyond, it is crucial to find ways to build bridges between the generations before us to ensure that the world that we are creating is better for the ones who come after us. But this can only happen if millennials, Gen X, and beyond are able to recognize our unique contributions and give us a space to influence change. It means coming to the table with open minds rather than barriers which are built upon outdated norms or fears of change. So, how can we achieve this? Firstly, by fostering intergenerational dialogue, creating spaces where ideas and experiences are exchanged freely. Secondly, mentorship, but not in the traditional sense of mentorship, which goes from older to younger, but reverse mentorship, which is from younger to older, because it is equally more powerful. The generations before us can guide us with their experiences, while we can teach them how to navigate and leverage modern tools into social media and digital storytelling. Thirdly, by embracing collaborative action. Instead of working in silos or clinging to generational stereotypes, we need to co-create solutions. Climate change and activism is a perfect example of this, of how boomers who have witnessed environmental changes over decades and understand the long-term impacts can contribute invaluable knowledge and experiences. Meanwhile, you and I, the Gen Z, with our digital influency and ability to mobilize global communities online, can amplify those efforts on an unprecedented scale. And finally, and this is very important, this requires a willingness to break down stereotypes. The Gen Z isn't lazy and spoiled. Millennials aren't self-centered. Boomers aren't out of touch. When we stop reducing each other to caricatures is when we start to create spaces for trust, for respect, and meaningful collaboration. Because in the end, our fight is not just about the challenges we face. It's about the legacy we leave behind. It's about ensuring that when the next generations look back on us, they don't see a group of young people who were overwhelmed by the weight of the world. Rather, they see a generation that fought back and refused to accept the status quo. It's about rewriting the script from scratch, turning fear into courage, suspicion into trust, and despair into hope. And we're not doing it alone. Each one of us here has the power to be part of this change. Each one of us here can choose to bridge the gaps between generations, tear down barriers, and build something better together. Because if not now, then when? If not us, then who? Thank you. Thank you.